Welcome to my YouTube channel, Manameni Nalame, Mental Health with Anne, a bilingual channel in Tamil and English. In today's guest room section, I have with me Solomon AGAJE, a registered psychologist in Alberta, Canada. Solomon has several years of experience and expertise working in the field of mental health with individuals, groups, and families with mental health concerns. Solomon also has extensive experience and knowledge working with families and individuals, immigrants and refugees from East Africa. Join me in conversation to learn about the work that Solomon does. Hi, Solomon.
Hi, Anne.
Hi, thank you so much for joining me in my guest room section for my YouTube channel, Manameni Nalame, a bilingual channel in Tamil and English, in the section guest room. So it is an honor to have you here, Solomon, and it is my understanding that you are a very busy therapist, a psychologist. So thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today to talk about some of the critical issues and important issues. So,
absolutely, Solomon. Thank you. Solomon, why don't we start today's interview with you telling us a little bit about yourself?
So yeah, I'm a registered psychologist with active treatments. It's a private clinical practice that provides clinical psychological supports for people. I also am a clinical consultant with Immigrant Outreach Society, and this is a non-profit emerging organization that provides mental health and psychosocial supports for ethnic minorities, refugees, and immigrants from East Africa. I'm a husband. I'm a father of two. I think that's pretty much what I can say.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thanks for the brief and very informative introduction, Solomon. Solomon, you're a therapist. I would really love to know about your journey of becoming a therapist. Is that something you dreamt about as a young boy, a young adult, or did it just happen? Tell us a little bit about that.
No, interesting. So I think since high school and even kind of before during my undergrad studies, I have been quite puzzled and interested about human behavior, about human nature, about thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. And so I have been quite interested in philosophy and psychology. So once I have joined my undergrad studies, I was kind of like undecided which route I should take. And as you know, philosophy doesn't buy you breads, and so I chose the route of psychology. And so I completed my undergraduate studies in psychology at Addis Ababa University. And after graduating, I lectured psychology in some of higher institutions in Ethiopia. And after a while, I was quite privileged and I was quite lucky to get a full scholarship at University of Oslo, Norway. And so I went there and completed my Master of Philosophy degree in psychology in 2008. And so I came to Canada as a skilled immigrant. And so after coming to this country, I have kind of journeyed into this kind of difficult process of finding myself as a registered psychologist. The journey was quite difficult. It was quite challenging. And at the same time, it was quite fulfilling. And so I'm currently a fully registered psychologist. And I have been practicing psychotherapy since 2016. And so I would say as a provisional psychologist since 2014. And so it's been quite a lovely journey. I'm quite proud of the work and the person I have become when I think of becoming a psychologist. That also kind of means that there has been some challenges and difficulties that I have to overcome, which your listeners might want to take note of as well. So that's quite my journey as a registered psychologist.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that there were a lot of challenges, but at the same time, I'm sure, right, you're happy to be where you are, and I'm sure there's a lot of positive that's come from it. But it hasn't been an easy
Sure.
one. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. As an immigrant, so if I'm understanding this correct, Solomon, you immigrated from Ethiopia, right? And that's where you were born and raised. That's where you're originally from,
Mm.
right? So as
Yeah,
you
that's right.
Right. So as you immigrated to Canada, when was that? And tell us a little bit, not only as a professional, but especially because you are a mental health therapist, a psychologist, like if you reflect from the perspective of mental health, and if you view your own journey and your families, you said you're a husband, you have two children, for that family to come here and integrate into Canadian society positively, what did that journey look like?
Hmm. Quite a good journey. I came to Canada in 2008. I had some experience living abroad, as a
Yeah.
student in Norway. And so that had helped me what
Mhm.
I can expect. When I came to Canada, I thought I would just I would just become a psychologist just right away. But, I didn't kind of understand the process of being registered and being just qualifying and being a member of the College of Alberta Psychologists. Uh, was quite something that was difficult, and I was unaware of it, and it took me years to learn that, to kind of adapt myself, get the right information, take additional courses, complete EPPP, oral exam, and stuff like that. So that was quite challenging, I would say. But overall, and then after 2 years, my wife joined me, and we have two kids as well. We are quite privileged to live in this beautiful country. There is so much that this country can provide. Again, in terms of even being able to practice psychotherapy, being able to become a psychologist, to work in the field with the most competent and qualified psychologists, that's quite a privilege that I don't take it lightly. The peace and the security that we enjoy in this country is amazing. It's a country of laws. It's a country of institutions. And so, if people can work hard and if they can somehow meet those, required expectations, it's a place where we can become what we have dreamed of becoming. And so it's just quite a beautiful journey. But it doesn't mean that if there are no challenges, it doesn't mean that you will not be facing and experiencing difficulties. So again, as an immigrant, like I said, my degree was not like I had to apply for, CAP, College of Alberta Psychologists,
Mm.
and I was required to take additional courses. And I know so many immigrants and refugees who come to this country with their PhDs, and medical doctors might not be qualified, or might not, their credentials might not be, accepted. And so I can see the challenges for immigrants and refugees in that regard. And so you will see so many immigrants, being underemployed or unemployed, unable to get a decent job, and living in a financially and housing dire situations, raising families in a state of poverty and stuff like this. This could be people who can easily be integrated in the system, and could contribute to the system as well. So yeah, so there is racism, there is kind of structural and institutional racism that we have to pass through to prove ourselves of who we really are. But other than that, when you compare, the pros and cons, the pros outweigh the cons. There is winter, there is cold. It could be quite, we're dealing with like cold, long winters, and that might be challenging as well for newcomers. But overall, I think this is a country where we can somehow, achieve our dreams if we really, really work hard and put the effort. So, yeah, overall, the journey had been quite fulfilling, I would say, and I'm quite happy with the way I find myself these days. So.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Solomon. You took me down memory lane of my own experiences coming here in 2013 as a skilled worker. And I really hear you when you said, right, you came here and you thought you'd immediately get a job. That was what
Yes.
immigration told me as well, right? And these are the things that are not, people are not aware. They are not enough supports even today when people come in. Right? And I think part of us doing this interview is to help people understand this. And there's still a lot of work to do. And thank you for pointing out that part of the bigger problem is systemic racism, right? Where the systems and structures in place are not really to help immigrants and refugees to succeed. And the challenges that they continue to go through, which again then affects our mental and physical health. Thank you so much for sharing that. And hopefully the future holds better for all of us, because people like you and I know how hard it is to get here. And once we do get here, we also do rededicate ourselves to helping our own communities. Now, coming to that, my understanding is you work and you also volunteer with a lot of ethnic communities within the African continent. Can you tell me a little bit about the populations that because when we talk about, we often refer to Africa like a country. It's a huge continent with 54 plus countries, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. So what are the populations that you work with, Solomon?
And thank you, Anne, for kind of making that distinction as well. We in the Immigrant Outreach Society portfolio mandate, we work predominantly with East African, refugees and immigrants. And these are countries like Eritrea, Ethiopia, South Sudan, Somalia, and Djibouti predominantly. And you're right. People who come from East Africa are distinctively different from people who come from, let's say, West Africa or South Africa, or as a matter of fact, different from other countries, whether it's Asia, Middle East, or other Latin American countries. So it's a good way to think that all immigrants, even African immigrants, even Black immigrants, are not. You cannot kind of put them in the same category. Now, when we talk about ethnic minorities and refugees from East Africa, most of the immigrants in Calgary are from Ethiopia and Eritrea predominantly, and so most of them come to Canada leaving conflict, persecution, political problems. And so you would see that there's a lot of trauma. There is a lot of problems integrating in the system, and so we see predominant complex mental health issues that are not currently being addressed by the current mental health systems and current psychosocial systems. And so there are some service gaps that we see. And so what we have been doing with Immigrant Outreach Society, or IOS, is trying to fill these gaps. And so we've been trying to provide mental health services, psychosocial services that are culturally appropriate, that are language specific, and we have been providing a lot of community-based approaches. And so that's the kind of populations that I serve, and it's been a good journey as well. These are people who, like I said, who struggle with a lot of severe untreated trauma situations. There is a lot of depression. There is a lot of substance abuse, especially among the young. Ganging involvement is quite predominant and common. You might have heard news that youth from South Sudan or Somalia or Ethiopia, committing like homicide and substance overdose and stuff like that. So we believe that that's a result of untreated trauma, especially by their parents, and subsequent neglect and abuse. And so and the reason that they have not been able to access services because of structural issues. The mental health system does not provide language specific and culturally appropriate services. The system is doing the best it can, but it's not quite enough to stretch out to those vulnerable and disfranchised communities. And so that's what we're trying to fill the gaps, really. Again, we're trying to kind of bring about how can we provide culturally appropriate services that take into account pre-trauma experiences, deeper, intricate cultural nuances. And so it's been quite an organic intervention, and there has been a number of learnings that we had been kind of learning. Yeah, I don't want to take. I think I have spoken so much about it, but yeah, that's the kind of populations that we have been serving. So
yeah. Thank you, Solomon. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for doing what you do, because you and I know that there is a huge dearth of mental health professionals, not just mental health professionals,
yes,
professionals in the field that can serve these populations, right? Because the diversity in Canada keeps increasing, but then we don't have enough people as service providers representing these communities and who have the knowledge, the experience, and all these things to work effectively with them. So thank you for doing what you do. My next question for you, Solomon, is when we talk about these African communities, that the East African communities that you are referring to, and generally Black people within Canadian society, what are some stereotypes or biases that you are aware of that they continue to face that can affect their mental health?
Yeah, you're right. I think it's quite challenging for many kind of refugees and immigrants. And I think mainly what I want to highlight is the bias coming from kind of the system, the bias coming from the structure itself, right? So, the structure in the system is mainly set up for mainstream Canadians, white Canadians. And so when immigrants and refugees kind of show up, they find that there is a huge disconnect, that it's not meant to serve them. I talked about credential evaluation, in that most refugees and immigrants, credentials, whether they have highly qualified, credentials, those are not quite accepted, and that creates a lot of, problem, a lot of disconnect, a lot of a state where they have to live under mainstream Canadians, a state where they have to live in a state of poverty, a state where they have to live in a state of financial challenges and constraints. And I believe that this is coming from the system, the laws, the policies and the regulations that are already, set in place. So those are not quite accepting, those are not quite accommodating, those are not quite helpful, if you will. So that's a huge bias that we face as immigrants. And institutionally, sometimes you find out that some institutions don't go beyond and above to integrate, to include refugees and immigrants in their systems. So employment-wise, for example, people get discriminated because of their color, or because of their name, or because of their accent, and so. Again, that kind of adds into the socioeconomic challenges, mental health challenges, and kind of deeper dissatisfactions that most immigrants kind of face as well. And, some systems, again, they are doing the best it can, again, but they are not reaching out. Like, for example, the mental health system, a typical Ethiopian or Eritrean would have a hard time finding a psychologist or a social worker who speaks, Amharic or Tigrinya, who speaks their language, or somebody who can understand their culture. And so people don't feel safe, and this kind of systemic and structural and kind of institutional biases are there without really, without being aware by those who are providing these services, right? And so there is racism at all levels, and this continues to impact the well-being of refugees and immigrants. And so it's a criminal justice system. Like, we can talk a lot about that, as well as it's overly represented by refugees and immigrants and indigenous population, and so that also says something. I understand that they are trying to bring about initiatives and anti-racism initiatives. There is a talk around, Black Lives Matter, and including Blacks and engaging communities and stuff like that. But I think there is a lot of work that needs to be done. There is so much area of improvements that we need to bring in our society, so that our people would feel quite included and enjoy, the rights and privilege that are kind of based for them. So yeah, a number of challenges, a number of biases and stereotypes against refugees are very resilient people. They were able to move out of their home countries where they feel quite safe and convenience, and that takes a lot of courage, that takes a lot of bravery, and so we know that they can make it, and most can make it as well. But I think the systems should open up a little bit, and somehow take into account the challenges that we are facing. So I think there should be some efforts in place by policymakers, by politicians, or by our leaders to kind of open up a space so we can somehow live a life worth living. So.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Solomon. You spoke to so many things. I'm hearing you point out to the very evident fact that we bring in so many refugees and immigrants, which means we need so many service providers in these communities. But then on the other end, we don't make it easy for the professionals within these communities to become professionals. So we set up a vicious cycle, and then we push people into poverty, which leads to other mental health issues. And obviously, there are more representation within with law enforcement, right? So all these different things, it's like a vicious cycle. And as you said, there are efforts that are being made, but I think we really need to step up our game, and the change has to happen more faster. And you pointed out a beautiful fact that refugees are not only immigrants, but refugees flee war-torn countries, their homes, and they're resilient enough to reach us here. And that we have to focus more on their resilience and look into ways that we can help these people succeed and benefit this community and the economy as well. Thank you for speaking to that, Solomon.